Have you ever noticed how a simple red thread, tied around the left wrist, can conceal ancient mysteries that modern psychology continues to explore? Carl Jung, the revolutionary Swiss psychoanalyst, found in this ancient symbol a key to understanding the deepest secrets of the human psyche. But why precisely the left wrist? Why does the color red awaken something so primal in our soul? And how can this seemingly insignificant object unlock spiritual connections that our rational mind could never have imagined? For decades, Jung explored the universal archetypes residing in our collective unconscious. He discovered that the red thread is not merely a lucky charm or superstition. It is a direct portal to the hidden layers of our consciousness. It represents invisible connections that transcend time and space, revealing truths about our destiny and purpose that traditional science still cannot explain. Prepare to discover how a seemingly simple symbol can transform your understanding of synchronicity, predestined relationships, and the invisible thread connecting all souls. What Jung revealed will surprise you. 1. The mystery of the left wrist. Why this part of the body? When Carl Jung first encountered patients wearing a red thread around their left wrist, he was not immediately struck by superstitions or folklore. Instead, his analytical mind began to question the profound significance of this specific location. Why the left wrist? What ancient wisdom led countless cultures to choose this precise spot for their most sacred protective symbols? The answer lies in the architecture of human consciousness and the subtle energies that Jung spent his life exploring. The left side of the body, according to both ancient traditions and modern neurobiology, represents our receptive, intuitive, and feminine aspect. This is not about gender, but about the fundamental duality that exists within every human being, regardless of their physical form. Jung discovered that the left wrist acts as a unique gateway to our unconscious, in contrast to the dominant right side, which governs our logical and analytical thinking. The left side operates in the realm of symbols, dreams, and intuitive knowing. When we place a red thread in this specific location, we create a physical anchor for energies that exist beyond our conscious awareness. The wrist itself holds particular significance in Jungian psychology. It symbolizes the connection between the hand, our ability to act and create in the world, and the arm, which represents our strength and will. The left wrist thus becomes a bridge between our unconscious wisdom and our capacity to manifest that wisdom in physical reality. It is the point where the invisible becomes visible, where inner knowledge transforms into outward action. Ancient cultures understood this intuitively. In traditional Chinese medicine, the left wrist contains pulse points that reveal the state of the heart, an organ associated with consciousness and spiritual awakening. Hindu traditions speak of subtle energy channels that pass precisely through this spot, connecting us to higher realms of existence. Even in Jewish mysticism, the left hand is considered the receptive hand, the one that draws in divine energy and protection. Jung's patients often reported profound shifts in consciousness after beginning to wear a red thread on their left wrist. They described feeling more connected to their dreams, more attuned to synchronicities, and more open to the subtle messages that life constantly sent their way. This was not a mere placebo effect. It was the activation of dormant aspects of their psyche that were waiting to be acknowledged. The choice of the left side is also tied to what Jung called the shadow, those aspects of ourselves that we have rejected or ignored. Placing a red thread on the left wrist does not hide this shadow. Rather, it embraces it as an essential part of our wholeness. By placing the thread on the receptive side, we invite these hidden aspects of ourselves to emerge and integrate into our conscious personality. Modern neurobiology has confirmed many of Jung's intuitions about the significance of the left side. The right hemisphere of the brain, which controls the left side of the body, is associated with creativity, intuition, spatial awareness, and the processing of emotional and symbolic information. By focusing attention on the left wrist through the presence of the red thread, we stimulate neural pathways that connect us to these more subtle aspects of consciousness. The left wrist also represents vulnerability in a way that Jung found deeply meaningful. Unlike other parts of the body that we can easily hide or protect, the wrist is exposed, visible, and vulnerable. Choosing to place a sacred symbol in this delicate spot requires courage and trust, qualities that Jung considered essential for spiritual growth and psychological integration. 2. The color red and its hidden psychological secrets. The choice of the color red for the sacred thread was never arbitrary, and Carl Jung's research into the psychology of colors revealed layers of meaning that go far beyond cultural preferences or aesthetic choices. Red, within the landscape of human consciousness, acts as a fundamental frequency that resonates with our deepest psychological and spiritual centers. Jung discovered that red represents the life force itself, what he called libido in its broadest sense, encompassing not only sexual energy but also the vital force that fuels all creation and transformation. When we encounter red, something primal awakens within us, something that connects us to the very essence of being alive. This is not a learned behavior. It is encoded in our genetic memory, passed down through millions of years of human evolution. The psychological impact of red operates on multiple levels simultaneously. At the most basic level, red increases heart rate, stimulates circulation, and heightens alertness, physiological responses that prepare us for action and change. But Jung understood that these physical responses were merely the surface manifestation of far deeper psychological processes. In the realm of the unconscious, red serves as a bridge between the material and spiritual worlds. It is the color of blood, the sacred fluid that carries life through our bodies, but also the color of fire, the element that transforms matter into energy. By wearing red on the left wrist, we invoke both aspects, the grounding, life-sustaining power of blood and the transcendent, transformative power of fire. Jung's analysis of his patients' dreams showed that red consistently appeared during moments of significant psychological breakthroughs. It marked transitions from one state of consciousness to another, serving as a harbinger of transformation that was both necessary and inevitable. The red thread thus becomes a conscious invitation to these transformative processes, a way of signaling to the unconscious that we are ready for change. Red is also linked to what Jung called the anima and animus, the feminine and masculine aspects present in every individual. Red embodies the passionate, creative, life-giving qualities that transcend gender roles and speak to our fundamental humanity. By wearing red, we acknowledge and honor these core aspects of our nature. Ancient traditions intuitively understood the psychological power of red. In many cultures, red was reserved for the most sacred ceremonies and the most potent protective rituals. It was the color of gods and goddesses associated with love, war, creation, and destruction, seemingly opposing forces that Jung recognized as different facets of the same transformative energy. The specific shade of red used in traditional threads also carries psychological significance. It is not the bright, artificial red of modern synthetic materials, but a deeper, more complex red, derived from natural dyes like madder root, cochineal, or iron oxide. These natural reds contain subtle variations that speak to different aspects of our psychological structure, creating a more nuanced and complete resonance with our inner landscape. Jung observed that patients who worked with the color red in their active imagination exercises often experienced breakthroughs in areas where they were stuck or stagnant. Red seemed to dissolve psychological barriers, allowing repressed emotions and insights to rise to the surface and integrate into conscious awareness. The red thread serves a similar function, acting as a constant, gentle stimulus that keeps these transformative processes active. The visibility of red also plays a key psychological role. Unlike more subtle colors that can fade into the background of our consciousness, red demands attention. It forces us to remain aware of our spiritual intention, preventing our sacred practices from becoming unconscious habits. Every time we see the red thread, it reminds us of our commitment to growth and transformation. In Jungian terminology, red represents the prima materia, the raw material of consciousness that holds infinite potential for development. It is the color of beginnings, the initial spark that ignites the process of individuation. By wearing a red thread on the left wrist, we continually connect to this creative potential, ensuring that our spiritual practice remains alive and dynamic, rather than becoming a mere ritual or superstition. 3. The invisible thread: how Jung discovered the connections of destiny. Carl Jung's most profound discovery regarding the red thread did not come from ancient texts or cultural studies, but from a series of extraordinary coincidences that upended everything he thought he knew about reality. It began with a patient named Marie, a middle-aged woman struggling with recurring dreams of a red thread that seemed to connect her to people she had never met. Jung initially approached this as a typical case of symbolic dream analysis, but what happened next forever changed his understanding of human connections. During one session, Marie described a vivid dream in which she followed a red thread through a labyrinthine city, eventually coming face to face with a man she had never seen before. The thread connected their left wrists, pulsating with warm, vibrant energy. 3 days later, Marie encountered that exact man in a cafe. The same face, the same gentle eyes, and even the same scar above the left eyebrow she had noticed in her dream. Even more astonishing, he had dreamed of her in an identical way. This incident sparked Jung's intensive research into what he later understood as the phenomenon of the invisible thread, mysterious connections that exist between souls across time and space. He began documenting similar cases, finding pattern after pattern that conventional psychology could not explain. Patients dreamed of red threads linking them to strangers, only to meet those individuals days or weeks later, often in circumstances that seemed orchestrated by an intelligence beyond ordinary understanding. Jung realized that the red thread was not merely a symbol. It was a physical representation of real energetic connections that exist within what he called the collective unconscious. These threads of connection operate beyond the constraints of physical space and linear time, linking souls that share karmic bonds, unfinished business, or complementary purposes in their journey of individuation. This discovery led Jung to develop his theory of synchronic threads, invisible lines of meaningful coincidence that weave through our lives, forming the very fabric of destiny. He observed that people who wore red threads on their left wrist seemed more attuned to these synchronic patterns, as if the physical thread acted as an antenna, amplifying their sensitivity to this invisible web of connections. These connections often manifested in specific forms. Some threads linked people destined to heal old wounds. Others connected individuals who mutually spurred spiritual growth. Still others united souls sharing significant relationships in what appeared to be past lives. The red thread did not create these connections. It simply made them visible and accessible to conscious awareness. One of Jung's most fascinating cases involved a businessman named Heinrich, who, after a series of professional failures, began wearing a red thread. Within months, he met 7 different people, all strangers, who had dreamed of him. Each of these individuals possessed exactly the skills, connections, or resources Heinrich needed to rebuild his career. Even more astonishing, several of them had been guided to specific locations by dreams involving red threads, leading to their chance encounters with Heinrich. Jung documented that the phenomenon of the invisible thread operated according to principles that transcended ordinary causality. Distance seemed irrelevant. He noted cases of people experiencing simultaneous physical sensations in their left wrist when their thread partners underwent significant life events, even when separated by continents. Time also appeared fluid. with some individuals reporting precognitive dreams of future encounters that later materialized exactly as dreamed. The psychological implications were staggering. Jung realized that human beings do not exist as isolated entities, but as interconnected nodes in a vast network of consciousness. The red thread tradition preserved this ancient wisdom, providing a practical method for accessing and working with these deeper levels of connection. By wearing a red thread, we are not merely following a superstition. We are participating in a technology of consciousness that our ancestors understood far better than modern science. Jung's exploration of the invisible thread led him to discover that these connections often carried important messages or guidance. Patients reported receiving insights, warnings, or inspirations through their thread connections, as if the network served as a communication system for higher wisdom. Some described feeling drawn to specific locations where they would encounter exactly the person or information they needed for the next step in their lives. This phenomenon also proved profoundly healing. Jung observed that many of his patients experienced deep emotional and even physical healing when they consciously worked with their thread connections. It was as if the invisible network possessed its own intelligence, orchestrating encounters and experiences that served the highest good of each individual, while contributing to the collective evolution of consciousness. Perhaps most remarkable, Jung discovered that red thread connections were not random, but followed patterns suggesting the operation of a kind of cosmic intelligence. Individuals were linked to others who could help them fulfill their unique purpose, overcome their specific challenges, or develop their particular gifts. The invisible thread seemed to be part of a larger design, guiding souls toward their destiny while weaving together the greater tapestry of human experience. 4. Synchronicity and the power of the red symbol. The relationship between Carl Jung's revolutionary concept of synchronicity and the red thread tradition represents one of the most fascinating intersections between ancient wisdom and modern psychological understanding. Jung's definition of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that cannot be explained by cause and effect, found its most striking expression in the experiences of people who use the red thread as a spiritual practice. Jung began noticing this connection when analyzing the life patterns of patients who wore red threads. Their stories were filled with what he initially dismissed as extraordinary coincidences, but as the patterns accumulated, he realized he was witnessing something far more significant. The red thread seemed to act as a magnet for synchronic events, drawing meaningful coincidences into the wearer's life with a frequency that defied statistical probability. The mechanism behind this phenomenon, as Jung discovered, lies in the symbolic power of the red thread itself. In Jungian psychology, symbols are not mere representations. They are living entities that exist at the boundary between consciousness and the unconscious, between the personal and the collective. When we interact with a powerful symbol like the red thread, we activate archetypal forces that begin to transform our reality in accordance with the symbol's inherent meaning and purpose. The red thread symbol carries the archetype of connection, destiny, and sacred partnership. By placing this symbol on our body, particularly on the receptive left wrist, we essentially program our unconscious mind to recognize and attract experiences aligned with these archetypal patterns. The unconscious then begins to guide our attention, decisions, and even physical movements in ways that increase the likelihood of encountering synchronic events. Jung documented countless examples of how this process unfolded in his patients' lives. One woman, Sarah, after a painful divorce, began wearing a red thread, feeling completely disconnected from any sense of purpose or community. Within 2 weeks, she experienced a series of synchronicities that seemed almost magical in their precision. She found a book on relationship healing in a random bookstore, met a therapist specializing in her specific trauma while standing in line at a grocery store, and was invited to join a support group by a stranger who approached her in a cafe after noticing her red thread. What made these events synchronic, rather than mere chance, was their meaningful nature and perfect timing. Each encounter brought Sarah exactly what she needed at that moment in her healing journey, and each person she met had been guided to her through their own series of meaningful coincidences. The red thread had somehow activated a field of synchronicity around her life. Jung's analysis revealed that the red thread works by creating what he called synchronic coherence, a state in which the inner psychological world and the outer physical world begin to mirror each other with increasing precision. Thoughts, dreams, and intentions start to manifest as external events and encounters with a speed and accuracy that suggest the usual boundaries between inner and outer reality have become more permeable. The color red plays a key role in this process. Red is associated with the root chakra in Eastern traditions, the energy center that governs our connection to physical reality and our ability to manifest intentions in the material world. By working with red as a conscious symbol, we strengthen the bridge between consciousness and physical manifestation, facilitating the materialization of synchronic events. Jung observed that synchronicities attracted by the red thread often appeared in clusters, as if the symbol created windows of heightened possibility, where multiple meaningful coincidences could unfold simultaneously. During these periods, his patients reported feeling as though they were living in a state of grace, where every person they met and every situation they encountered seemed perfectly orchestrated to support their growth and evolution. The placement of the thread on the left wrist proved critical to its synchronic power. The left side of the body is governed by the right brain hemisphere, which processes pattern, meaning, and connection rather than linear logic. By placing the symbol on this side, we engage the part of our consciousness naturally attuned to synchronic patterns and meaningful relationships. Jung also discovered that the synchronic effects of the red thread were amplified when multiple people in the same community or social circle wore them simultaneously. The thread seemed to create a network effect, where synchronicities experienced by one person often involved or benefited other group members. This suggested that the symbol's power operated not only individually, but collectively, weaving together the destinies of all who participated in the practice. The most profound aspect of the red thread's connection to synchronicity was its ability to reveal hidden patterns and connections that always existed, but remained invisible to ordinary consciousness. Jung found that his patients began to perceive their entire life story differently, recognizing threads of meaning and purpose that connected seemingly random events into a coherent narrative of growth and evolution. The red thread did not create these patterns. It simply made them visible. 5. The collective unconscious and the universal language of symbols. Carl Jung's revolutionary discovery of the collective unconscious found one of its most compelling confirmations in the universal appearance of the red thread symbol across cultures with no historical contact. From the ancient temples of Tibet to the indigenous tribes of the Amazon, from the mystical traditions of medieval Europe to the spiritual practices of Aboriginal Australia, the red thread emerged as a consistent symbol of protection, connection, and destiny. This universality was not a mere coincidence for Jung, but evidence of what he called archetypal patterns, fundamental structures of meaning that exist in the deepest layers of human consciousness. The collective unconscious, this vast reservoir of shared human experiences accumulated over millennia of evolution, speaks through symbols that transcend cultural boundaries and linguistic differences. The red thread represents one of these primordial symbols, carrying meanings that resonate with every human soul, regardless of cultural background. Jung's exploration of the red thread's cultural manifestations revealed fascinating variations, yet all pointed to the same fundamental archetypal truth. In the Jewish tradition, the red thread worn on the left wrist is tied to a mystical understanding of protection against the evil eye and negative energies. This practice originates at the tomb of Rachel, where pilgrims would wrap a red thread 7 times around the tomb before cutting it into protective bracelets. This ritual connects the wearer to the matriarchal energy of protection and care that Rachel represents in Jewish consciousness. In Chinese culture, the red thread appears in the legend of the red thread of fate, where an invisible red cord connects those destined to meet, regardless of time, place, or circumstances. This thread may stretch or tangle, but never breaks, ensuring that predestined encounters occur at the right moment. The Chinese understanding emphasizes the thread's role in romantic destiny, but Jung recognized that the archetype encompasses all forms of meaningful relationships, not just romantic partnerships. Hindu and Buddhist traditions incorporate red threads into numerous spiritual practices, from sacred thread ceremonies marking spiritual initiation, to red cords blessed by holy men, and tied around devotees' wrists for protection and spiritual growth. In these traditions, the red thread represents the connection between the individual soul and universal consciousness, serving as a reminder of our innate divinity and spiritual potential. Native American cultures have their own versions of red thread symbolism and other protective talismans. The red thread in these traditions represents the life force that connects all beings in a web of existence, emphasizing the interconnectedness of all life and the responsibility to honor these sacred connections. What struck Jung most powerfully was that these diverse cultural expressions shared common themes, despite developing in complete isolation from one another. The consistent association with protection, the emphasis on connection across time and space, the placement on the left wrist or other vulnerable body parts, and the use of red as a sacred color all pointed to a deeper truth that transcended cultural conditioning. This universality suggested to Jung that the red thread symbol emerges from the collective unconscious as a natural expression of fundamental human needs and experiences. This symbol addresses our deep longing for connection, our need for protection against unknown forces, and our intuitive understanding that we exist within a web of meaningful relationships that surpasses our ordinary perception. Jung found that when individuals began working with the red thread, they often spontaneously developed practices and understandings that mirrored these ancient traditions, even if they had no prior knowledge of the cultural contexts. This phenomenon provided strong evidence for his theory that archetypal knowledge exists within each of us, waiting to be activated by the right symbols and practices. The collective unconscious communicates through symbols because symbolic language transcends the limitations of rational thought and cultural conditioning. A symbol like the red thread can convey complex truths about reality that would require volumes of philosophical discourse to explain intellectually. This symbol bypasses the analytical mind and speaks directly to a deeper knowledge residing in our souls. Jung observed that patients who worked with the red thread often began accessing other archetypal symbols and insights from their own unconscious depths. The thread seemed to act as a key, unlocking access to a broader symbolic realm of the collective unconscious, allowing individuals to tap into the wisdom traditions of humanity as a whole, rather than being limited to their personal experiences and cultural background. The universal nature of the red thread symbol also revealed something profound about the evolution of human consciousness. Jung hypothesized that symbols like the red thread persist across all cultures because they serve fundamental functions in humanity's psychic and spiritual development. They provide tools for navigating the invisible dimensions of existence, which are just as real and significant as the physical world we can see and touch. The fact that the red thread appears in healing traditions, protective practices, and spiritual initiations across all cultures suggests that our ancestors understood something about consciousness and reality that modern civilization has largely forgotten. The collective unconscious preserves this ancient wisdom, making it accessible to those who learn to speak its symbolic language. 6. Predestined relationships. What the thread reveals about soulmates. Jung's research into the red thread phenomenon led him to one of his most controversial yet profound discoveries: the existence of predestined relationships. These connections between souls transcend ordinary explanations of attraction, compatibility, or circumstance. Through years of documenting cases where the red thread seemed to guide people to significant others, Jung developed a revolutionary understanding of how certain relationships serve deeper purposes of individuation and spiritual evolution. The concept of soulmates, though popular in romantic literature and spiritual circles, took on a new dimension through Jung's psychological lens. He discovered that predestined relationships, signaled by red thread connections, were not necessarily romantic, nor were they always harmonious or easy. Instead, these relationships served as catalysts for psychic and spiritual growth, bringing together individuals whose souls had contracted to help each other grow, heal, and fulfill their deepest purposes. Jung's patient records contain dozens of cases where individuals wearing red threads encountered people who felt immediately familiar, as if they had known each other forever. These encounters were often accompanied by intense emotional reactions, vivid dreams, and a sense of inevitability that defied rational explanation. More importantly, these relationships consistently triggered major life transformations, healing processes, and spiritual awakenings that neither individual could have achieved alone. One of Jung's most well-documented cases involved a musician named Thomas, who was struggling with creative blocks and deep depression. After beginning to wear a red thread, he experienced a series of dreams about a woman with distinctive amber eyes, who helped him unlock his artistic potential. 3 months later, he met Elena, a poet with the exact amber eyes from his dreams, in a bookstore where an inexplicable impulse had led him. Interestingly, Elena had experienced similar dreams of a musician who would inspire her to overcome her own creative stagnation. Their relationship developed as a perfect example of what Jung called sacred reciprocity. Thomas's musical abilities complemented Elena's poetic talents, creating collaborative works that neither could have produced alone. More importantly, their emotional and spiritual connections seemed to activate dormant potentials in their psyches, leading to breakthroughs in creativity, self-understanding, and life purpose. Jung observed that predestined relationships, identified through red thread connections, often involved what he called shadow work, the process of confronting and integrating rejected or hidden aspects of the personality. These soulmate connections often brought together individuals whose shadows complemented each other, creating opportunities for mutual healing and wholeness that could not occur in isolation. Red thread relationships also demonstrated Jung's concept of compensation, the psyche's natural tendency to seek balance and fulfillment. Individuals were often drawn to those who embodied qualities they had repressed or not developed in themselves. A highly rational person might be connected to someone deeply intuitive, while an extremely independent person might find themselves attracted to someone who could teach them interdependence and vulnerability. Jung discovered that these predestined relationships often included connections from past lives, though he approached this concept from a psychological rather than strictly reincarnationist perspective. Whether the memories and connections were literal past incarnations or symbolic representations of archetypal patterns, these relationships carried a quality of ancient familiarity and deep knowing that suggested the souls had indeed met before in various contexts. The timing of red thread soulmate encounters proved to be precisely orchestrated. Jung noted that these meetings almost always occurred when both individuals were ready for the specific kind of growth the relationship was meant to facilitate. It was as if an invisible intelligence governing synchronicity ensured that predestined encounters happened at exactly the right moment in each person's psychological and spiritual development. Not all predestined relationships were lasting or meant to last a lifetime. Jung identified different categories of soul connections, teaching relationships which delivered specific lessons before naturally concluding, healing relationships which addressed specific wounds or traumas, creative partnerships which facilitated artistic or innovative work, and what he called fulfillment relationships, rare connections where two souls were truly meant to journey together for an extended time. The red thread seemed to serve as a navigation system for this complex relationship dynamic. Individuals reported feeling physical sensations in their left wrist when near people with whom they shared significant soul connections. Some described the thread feeling warm or tingling. Others noted it seemed to pull in certain directions. Still others experienced vivid dreams or intuitive insights about people before meeting them. Jung also discovered that predestined relationships often involved entire groups or soul families, groups of people connected across multiple incarnations who continued to find each other to collaborate on shared missions of healing, creativity, or service to humanity. The practical implications of Jung's discoveries about predestined relationships were profound. He encouraged his patients to pay attention to the quality of their interactions with others, especially when wearing red threads. Deep, immediate recognition, intense emotional reactions, complementary gifts and challenges, and a sense of meeting someone significant were indicators of predestined connections that deserved conscious attention and cultivation. Jung emphasized that predestined relationships required conscious participation to fulfill their potential. Meeting a soulmate was not enough. Both individuals had to engage in the growth, healing, and service the relationship was meant to facilitate. The red thread served as a reminder of this sacred commitment, keeping both partners aware of the deeper purposes their relationship was meant to serve. 7. Conclusion. An invitation to live consciously in the mystery. As we conclude this exploration of Carl Jung's profound discoveries about the red thread, take a moment to reflect. Look at your left wrist. What invisible connections might already exist in your life that you have yet to recognize? What synchronicities have you dismissed as mere coincidence? Jung's revolutionary insights remind us that we are never truly alone. We exist within an intricate web of meaningful connections that transcend time, space, and our limited understanding of reality. The question is not whether these mystical threads of destiny exist, but rather whether you are ready to acknowledge them, honor them, and allow them to guide you toward the relationships, experiences, and purpose your soul has sought all along. The red thread is not just an ancient symbol. It is an invitation to live consciously in the very mystery of existence,